Hello everyone, welcome to Fleet's Catch-Up Ramblings. It's going to be a fairly quick one today, as I've got plenty of other things I need to do. I've got to do the Catch-Up Ramblings, and I've got to stream Star Wars this evening, so it might be 45 minutes, it might be an hour, it depends on how well it goes. I've got a lot to do this evening, and I'm running late because of other things that came up that I had to deal with, so it depends entirely on how many questions there are and how much catching up I've got to do. Ideally, if there's not a lot of questions, I will try and make it a short one because I do want to still have some catch-up ramblings to do on Friday. And like I said, I do have to also do the Star Wars this evening because I didn't have time to record the video on Sunday and I didn't get around to doing it yesterday. So I couldn't do it Monday, so I've basically got to do it live today. There you are, that was rapid fire for you. And then, of course, I get to do this now. Oof. There we go. Right, so, very quickly, first question, let's get on with it. Quick as we can. Where is it? Okay. Should be here somewhere. Here it is. Whew. So, 43, it should be somewhere down here. So 59. Yeah, 59 we answered through all of that. It's, yep, 60. 60 is where we are now. Did that. Okay, so first question for the catch-up from Ramblings. All these are going to be from Rambling 60. So we'll keep going until it reaches either 8 o'clock or until we get through all the questions. Because again, I still have things I need to add to the... Like I said, I've got other things to do tonight. I have to do the Star Wars stream as well. I wouldn't be here if I hadn't been just rushed off my free... yes?
Sleep. This is going to last about half an hour. Why did you bother pinging everyone? Because Ramblings takes about half an hour to get going.
Fine, then it'll last for longer, but then you'll have to explain to the Star Wars crowd why things aren't going well then, Foxo.
Okay. Star Wars crowd, it's a shit overblown franchise that's not worth the time spent on it anymore. There we go.
Well, either then or I'll have to do it stupidly late. Well, look, it'll last as long as I want it to last today.
By the way, Fleet.
Yep.
Moo was interested in potentially joining in too, so.
Oh, okay. That'll be fun if he shows up when they show up.
I've gone and let him know that you're alive.
Good. Okay, so let's get cracking. Besides, we've got some questions to work through, but we might be able to get them all done by 8 o'clock. I wanted to start an hour earlier, but I had to go and deal with something important. So, Fleet, do you like HMS Incomparable, considering you have a thing for ugly ships? Well, Incomparable's not ugly. Not in the traditional sense. She's just renowned on steroids. If you think about it.
No.
In terms of looks.
The original Comparable. Not the Wargaming Comparable.
I'm aware of the original Incomparable. Not the Wargame one, the original one. There was nothing wrong with how the original one looked. The original designer sketched out.
The one with the twin turrets in the centre?
What? Oh no.
Yeah, have you not seen Fisher's proposal for HMS Incomparable?
Oh yes, now I remember.
It's
Yeah.
one where it's 2 guns on the centre line.
Yeah, and
in
then
the
there's
centre of the ship.
and then there's another turret. Yeah, and there's 2 turrets either side. Um. Well, that Incomparable is a little bit cursed. But you can kind of understand why Fisher adopted the design he did. Doesn't make it not unconventionally styled, shall we say. But that's pretty much all I have to say on the matter, if you want the honest answer.
Let's just stick to the upscaled HMS Renown, please.
If I had €1 for every time a British carrier decided to engage something she should have engaged with aircraft, I'd have €2, which isn't a lot, but it's weird it happened twice. On a more serious note, how many euros would I have? 2. Because you just answered your own question. I don't quite understand. You just answered your own question there. You can't ask questions, Sidious. This is the catch-up ramblings. We're working through the catch-up questions. Which means that unless I finish all of... It does look like that Friday's ramblings will be a mostly extra ramblings with whatever's left over from this ramblings questions. If we don't get through them all, which we may get through them all. Question from a friend. Oh, we did that one. What if the USSR supplied North Vietnam with both Coma and Osa missile boats along with the Turret missiles? Do you think they will sink and or damage USN ships off Vietnam? How would the US counter this threat? Well, first of all, there would probably be an uproar over missile boats being supplied to Vietnam. Especially if it's during the war.
Not more so than, the SA2 guidelines. Or the MiG-21s. They might, if the U.S. hasn't caught their delivery and gets surprised by them. But the reality is they're going to get cluster bombed into oblivion.
Yes.
Yankee Station is pretty far off the coast. There's a bunch of surface action groups between them and the shore. And the other fun thing is that between the aircraft in the air, including E-1 Tracers, E-2 Hawkeyes, depending on what time period we're talking about here, how do I put this? Talos and Tartar have a longer range. Effectively, if you're having to do your own targeting. Because their radars are the radars that can be used are up higher than the ones on the missile boats. So if the missile boats are having to do their own targeting, which they would, they might get their missiles off. They're also dying. So you could potentially lose your entire missile boat force here for one U.S. cruiser. Or really frigate in this time period. So that's, a DLG or a CG. And is that really a trade North Vietnam's going to want to make? Probably not.
Yeah.
There's a reason they weren't actually supplied.
So,
and if they were, you'd be looking at Comars, and that's 2 missiles per in all likelihood.
Yeah. Thoughts on the Soviet Navy having 533mm torpedo tubes, unlike the LWT tubes like on NATO ships? Do you think they're still stuck in the World War II era, or do they need the extra firepower with those big torpedoes to hunt NATO subs?
What was that again?
Thoughts on the Soviet Navy warships having 533mm torpedo tubes, unlike the lightweight torpedo tubes on the on NATO ships. Do you think they're still stuck in
It's just another way to do it. Like, a lot of these ships did not carry helicopters. The reason that was done in the West was, simply put, so that you had a unified magazine. And later on, the other thing it allowed them to do is use those very torpedo tubes as launchers for standoff anti-submarine weapons to replace things like SSN-14A and B, which, you know, that is a way to do it. I'm not going to sit here and criticize them for it, because the kind of shots you use over the side torpedoes for is downline of bearing counterfire. So it greatly expands the ability of the warship to force wires to be broken, particularly given how Western torpedoes tend to be guided compared to Soviet anti-surface ones from submarines. They're not Wakehommers. They tend to be wire-guided torpedoes. So you force the sub to break the wire, and you also force the submarine to maneuver, because he or she's got to get out of, well, I guess, yeah, it's this time period, it's a male commander. He's got to get out of the way. He doesn't want to sit around and eat a torpedo, so he needs to clear that datum. And at that point, you've got a much better chance of localizing down the contact and dealing with it with other assets in the surface group. Or, if you've got a Kiev or a Moskva with you, vectoring a helicopter in to that. Because you've forced him to move, you've forced him to break his wires. He's now moving, at all likelihoods, 20 knots or more, if it's a nuclear boat. If it's not a nuclear boat, 15 knots or more, or whatever speed they can manage. And you can hear him. So it's a little more optimized for that philosophy rather than for logistical continuity, but they're also generally operating closer to their home bases. They sortie out. They don't deploy out, sort of a deal. You're not going 1,000 nautical miles or more. They're going a couple hundred. They sortie out. So it's just another way of approaching it.
So could you say they're more suppression tools in a sense?
Well, over the side torpedoes, they're not really there for suppression. It's he's down the target's down this line of bearing because you got shot down that line of bearing, and so in all likelihood, that's where the target is. So you're firing a weapon down. Yes, it forces him out of his position. It forces him to move. It also means that if he does not, he's more than likely going to eat a torpedo to the face. And it means that submarine commander has to make the decision of, did they actually detect my launch, or is this counterfire? And they can't risk that first option. So they have to act like it.
Mm-hmm. There we go. Okay, where was I? Yeah, Yes, I'm aware. Thank you. Follow up to question 3, which I can't actually find, so it must have gotten lost somewhere. Why didn't the US officially name the M60 tank series as a pattern as well?
It wasn't officially named the Patton
Yeah, I'm saying why didn't they?
because the U.S. doesn't tend to have to name vehicles. Like the designation is alphanumeric, whether the vehicle gets named or not. Just whether the Army feels like it.
Usually the names will be derived from the troops, and then and if the US feels like officializing them, they'll...
No.
Really?
Like M10 was officially named Booker, M1 Abrams was officially named Abrams, M2 Bradley and M3 officially named Bradley. It just really depends on what the Army's feeling like. Like Big Army feels like it doesn't work its way up from the bottom. It doesn't always get designated.
Fair enough. Next question. What if the 1938 Munich Agreement fell apart and after the British found out Hitler's plan of conquering most of Europe? Well, how would the British, French, and Germans react to this? Well, Britain and France are declaring war, and they're bringing the Poles with them. Have fun, Germany.
I don't think so.
If they've discovered unequivocally that he just plans to keep going,
Yeah.
then they can publish
Yeah,
that. Then they can
But
publish.
Fleet,
They're not going to preemptively declare war. So,
it's also the fact that a good reason that Chamberlain signs the music agreement is because Britain's not ready for war.
it basically buys them almost a full extra year.
Yes, but neither is Germany.
Yeah, and it gives them
So,
No, but the thing is...
so.
No, listen.
But the Luftwaffe
no.
is in much better condition than the RAF.
What was the preface of this question? I missed.
What if the 1938 Munich Agreement fell apart, basically after the British found out, basically, like, through somehow, that the Germans just planned to keep going?
They still have to sacrifice Czechoslovakia. It doesn't matter. Britain and France are not ready for that war at all. The Germans are better prepared.
I mean, in
The air
1938...
power isn't there. The ground power isn't there.
In
Heck, the navies aren't even really ready.
I mean, in 1938, the German Army and Air Force is...
It's bigger than most of...
Fleet. That doesn't matter in the calculus of London and Paris. What matters in the calculus of London and Paris is, can they defend their people well enough in the event of a war? And the answer is pretty unequivocally no.
And it's also got
their opportunity was Poland, and even then they didn't take the offensive.
Yeah. Because for context, Fleet, in 1938, by the time of Sudeten, Lord Nuffield hasn't even got stuff like the Morris plant ready for war yet.
And Britain's dealing with serious problems in the Empire regarding another continental war.
Yeah.
Canada and Australia are looking at London and going, no. We don't care.
You still have stuff like men like Downing going through the RAF's cupboards going, what the hell have you been doing? Most of these airframes are useless.
Well, the thing is, if the Munich Agreement's fallen apart, where does that leave us then? Because at that point, the Czechs are basically going to fight. The Czechs are going to fight. Would that mean Britain and France are not going to fight with them?
Then it's buying you more time. The Czechs fighting buys you more time. Fleet.
Yeah.
It might sound like awful ethical maths, but it's what's needed.
I mean, if the Czechs fight and at least delay the Germans, the Poles are...
Wouldn't make enough difference.
No.
Not for the Poles, unfortunately.
No, it might, because if the Czechs are fighting, and bear in mind, the premise for this is that the German plans have been found out, it will be communicated to the Poles that they are next, they will probably mobilise. They might not
Poland knew.
The Soviets
Poland knew already.
You know.
It didn't matter.
Poland's
Like,
magnified.
I think you're like. Remember, the state of the Polish military at this point is.
Isn't that bad actually by
awful.
European standards?
By European
It's not
standards,
bad.
but
It's the fact that they
yeah,
get
but it's not bad, but it's
backdoored.
awful compared to what the Germans would be able to potentially throw at them, as we do.
No,
frequently
no,
see.
actually, it's not.
Huh?
It's popularly viewed that way.
No, yes, it is, but it's still not enough to fend off the German army,
It is.
even going off
it's-
historical.
Just the irony is, they had effectively stopped the main thrust. They had lost quite a lot of ground, but they were slowing the Germans down.
And
It
mobilization
was the Soviets
kicking
coming in,
Yeah. Thing is, the Poles.
forcing them to send like 17 divisions east, which then caused the front line to collapse because, oh hey, we've had to take half of the army away.
Yeah.
But even in 1938, Poland's not ready for war.
No one's ready for war in 1938.
Yeah, and the Germans
Apart
are
from
the
Germany,
most ready. They're
effectively.
still not ready by what they view, but they're the most ready. Because going all the way back to Weimar, they have been utterly cheating on Versailles
Yeah.
and preparing for this.
And German high command aren't idiots. They know the development, especially of aircraft, that their production lead between 37 and 36, 37, 38 won't mean much in a couple of years once new models of aircraft come out. Because I won't want to take an early 109 against something like a Spitfire Mark 9.
But an early 109 versus a Hurricane or early Spitfire, well,
Yeah.
they've been training their pilots a lot more than the RAF's been focused on fighter pilots. The
Yeah.
RAF's been focused on bombers.
Yeah, until Downing gets to get the RAF shit together. And they're still recovering from that.
And as Phoenix has mentioned, there is a good chance that if Hitler goes in to Czechoslovakia wrong, there is a reasonable chance that he gets couped.
I thought the support for that plan wasn't as widespread as popular history's made it out to be.
Doesn't take very many people in that time period to get a bullet into his head.
Yeah, it's more so the fact that there was just a general, they did not really expect to be able to successfully go out to Czechoslovakia and be able to deal with, say, the French and the British coming in on the Czech side, because the Czechs were too well prepared, too good of a defensive position, too. The German army was not ready, nor were their fortifications on their western border ready, which the Germans placed a pretty significant emphasis on that, having that set up before they did any aggressions that were going to draw on the French.
Well, bearing in mind everything we've just discussed, it's been made clear that Britain and France aren't joining, so how could he get couped if he's...
Germany can't bet on that.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah, the Germans did not know for sure, hence why they ended up backing down.
well, yes, but it said the Munich crisis has come to a head, which means
Okay, and?
that...
No side is omnipotent, Fleet.
Yes, so... But if he's gone to war and it's become clear Britain and France aren't joining, doesn't the coup's whole potential run out of steam?
He has to get to that point.
Also, how do they know? Like, the Britain and France might just be holding off for war. Like, you don't know.
Are the
Just
Brits
'cause they
just
haven't
waiting
declared
on troops
yet.
from Canada?
Yeah. Just 'cause
Are they
haven't declared yet.
mobilizing themselves? Are the French mobilizing up their reserves and coming north?
You sort of got to remember that the Germans experienced with the British in the First World War, where aside from the BEF, the Empire was slow to mobilise, but had a pretty much unlimited source of men once it did. Like in the German calculus, are the British waiting to get that set up? So,
Like, you don't know what you don't know in war.
That's true.
And a lot of those questions are very important. And those
So,
answers can decide the war.
so if the Munich Agreement falls apart and Hitler just backs down...
Not necessarily.
Not
No,
necessarily.
Hitler can't back down. He has to
He's
go
got
to
to find
war.
another ramp.
Well, it's not even that. It's Hitler's entire authority is based off being the macho, strong leader, my indomitable will. You can't really project that. And
Also,
then
the fact he
act
was
it out.
delivering on what he was promising is the big thing as well, right? You know, we will have reached these mobilization targets. We will amp up production at home. We will do this. We will do that. And as far as the German people were concerned, because again, they had very effective propaganda. They were delivering on this. The Nazi messaging was very good, but any obvious setbacks internationally would obviously do a lot to deflate this.
Yeah.
So he's
So-
got to find a way to give himself an avenue for something here.
I mean, his choices to me seem to be the Czechs are categorically not going to give him anything unless they're pressured to. Britain and France are no longer willing to apply that pressure because the Munich Agreement's fallen apart. So his options
Are they?
Well, that's the whole thing. If the Munich Agreement
There
has
may be an option for another agreement.
well, like I said, we're just back on the normal timeline.
Not necessarily. It could be wildly different.
Yeah, but just assuming there's no disagreement, it's not like Czechoslovakia isn't surrounded by 2 to 3 other countries that want a piece of it.
To be fair,
what-
the country itself is kind of wanting to break apart to a degree. So
You might
there's
see.
Yeah, I
various
mean-
different movements
I
that
mean-
all basically, we want separation for our part.
I mean, to be fair,
I mean, because
you might
look
you
at
might
his
see
look at the historical.
you might see an
post-
earlier
Agreement.
version. You might see an earlier version. You might see Hitler pull off an earlier version of the invasion of Czechoslovakia, where it's a quote unquote invasion, but in reality, there's no fighting.
They'll be fighting.
Oh yeah, there will be fighting. That
They had the Sudetenland
the reason the Sudeten, it was the Sudetenland, right?
Yeah.
I'm not in a sick
Yeah,
haze.
definitely.
Yep.
That was generally pretty much viewed as German, not Czech. Outside, and Hitler really played on that. And the Allies were buying themselves time. Like, they knew they were. Even if the Allies, in principle, do not like what they're doing, right? They don't have much of a choice other than to come up with some agreement, even if it's not the Munich as we see it, to buy time. Even if that agreement is, we don't get involved. And throwing Czechoslovakia to the wolves.
Because let's really be real. France isn't in any position to go on an offensive war into Germany. And the Czechs, there's only so much you can do against mass, let's be real.
The Czech army wasn't too dissimilar once they get mobilized.
Yeah, I mean, the main problem the Czechs have is after the Anschluss of Austria, they're surrounded on Bohemia is surrounded on 3 sides.
Yeah.
So, granted, the other problem in reverse for the Germans, what they were looking at from their perspective is, holy fuck, we're going to be so wholly occupied by the Czechs that if the French march on us in the other side of the country, we will be completely fucked because we will have almost nothing out there. Now, granted,
Yeah.
obviously, from the French perspective, we know that the French were not really enthused about the idea of marching into Germany, given their own situation. But as far as the German calculus was concerned, there was a very real risk there from the French.
Because how much of this time do we just see the Germans leaning on the Hungarians more? Because the Hungarians, if I remember correctly, marched in to try and take Slovakia.
Yes, they only got southern Slovakia.
Yeah. But it could just be as simple as promising Hungary Slovakia in return for them shoring up the southern flank. of pushing through the south.
Oh, Pit 426. Your promoter has an interesting theory that his combined forces of Poland, Czechoslovakia plus France can beat the Germans. Yes, he's right. They can beat the Germans if they all fight together and don't squabble and all invade and don't act in their own self-interest. Which, yeah.
Don't assume that allies are going to fight together like the U.S. and UK do.
In fact, both of the various allies of World War II, right, except for the U.S. and UK, did most of their fighting parallel and uncoordinatedly, or often against each other's best interests. See the Axis in general.
Yeah, the Axis.
See, in fact, even within individual Axis countries and their service branches, but that's another discussion.
Or just see the Western Allies in the Soviet Union.
Oh yeah, that was
one
of the first examples, but yeah. I did say only US and UK for a reason.
Yeah, but the Soviet...
between the Soviets and the Western Allies, or even with the French and the Western Allies, there was there was a lot of back and forth of screwing each other over, and lack of coordination. And, he also had the whole fun thing where, for basically up until the last possible moment when he had no choice, you had FDR doing everything he possibly could not to recognize Free France and not to recognize de Gaulle, because he was very much set on the Vichy French being the official French government, and then getting an admiral from the Vichy Navy in North Africa to take over as leader of France, and that would be the guy they would deal with, not de Gaulle. Obviously, that fell apart when the guy was killed, and de Gaulle was really the only guy left. But
and that whole Vichy France actually fighting Allied troops in North Africa, that also kind of
honestly, that was kind of, let's say it wasn't expected, but that really was not as much of a factor in decision making as you would think. Roosevelt still wanted a Vichy admiral, or formerly Vichy admiral.
Wow,
somebody other than de Gaulle.
Well, yeah. We all want somebody other than de Gaulle.
Well, also, you have to remember, de Gaulle really was not a very high-ranking officer, so he was not really viewed as being that legitimate. Even in the early days of the Free French, right, in the UK, he had an admiral with him, a Free French admiral, who was the actual effective head of the Free French forces, even though de Gaulle was very much a lot of the drive behind it. This admiral is the figurehead because he actually had the rank to do so. And de Gaulle eventually maneuvered him out of the way, but
So yeah, Czechoslovakia is just a really bad position country for that conflict.
Well, to be fair, if the Anschluss hadn't happened, they'd be in a much better position, but that really was quite the decisive domino.
Makes sense.
Probably could have worked if Hungary wasn't against them as well. At that point, you've just got too big of an area to cover.
Yeah. Are we? I think we've pretty much hammered this in.
Yeah.
Okay, so next question is I need you to let me read this out and then make some clarifications, because there are some assumptions here that are just wrong. If the Japanese... So, since I shoved all my shenanigans up there, why not ask the question I've been meaning to? If the Japanese didn't pause her construction and finished her on time as a battleship by mid-1943, well, first of all, if they don't pause her construction, assuming build dates, she'd be worked up by mid-43, rather than finished by mid-43. And had her ready to fight by June 44, again, as I said, they'd have her ready to fight by the end of 1943. Assuming she isn't slapped by a submarine along the way up to Singapore to join with Ugaki's 1st Battleship Division, how does Shinano's presence as a battleship change the Battle of Sibian Sea, Battle of Samara, and Tengo? Quick reference for the changes between Yamato and Shinano. 12 by 2 100mm Akizuki turrets instead of 127s. I doubt that very highly. Improved fire control, integrated radar. Again, I doubt that very highly. If the Yamatos didn't have that refitted to them, why would Shinano have that as a new build? Thinner belt and thicker deck, that we do know. Belt is now welded. You don't weld battleship armor together, because otherwise you can't replace the plates when they get damaged in battle. Maybe a slight increase in speed to 29, 30 knots. No, that's just you're talking a ridiculous increase in horsepower required to achieve that. That's just never going to happen. But assuming that they just have another Yamato, but with slightly thinner belts and thicker deck armor, what does that change? Well, basically, what you've got is not really any change for Sibian C. Really, Musashi is probably still going to get a teeth kicked in by the U.S. Air Force.
So
The difference is
I think
really
we have a major problem with the assumptions here, which is if you want to have her ready in time, you're probably going to have to kill Shokaku or Zuikaku, because there is no way she's going to be in service in time for any of this unless you kill one of the fleet carriers and have her built alongside Yamato and Musashi. She was only laid down in May of 1940. If she's if she's built at the same pace as her sisters, she's not going to be completed until October 1944. And workup time, she's probably not ready for action until very early in 45. So probably the first action she's ready to take part in is Tengo itself, which is the suicide charge.
Sorry, I think you're completely wrong there. Because when she's under construction, bear in mind, you're correct when she's laid down, but when she's paused, she's 50% complete when she's paused in December 41. And from the other Yamato's build times, so 38...
So the other Yamato took 33 months on the slip to launch. Musashi is 31 months. If Shinano takes the balance and is launched in 32 months, from May of 1940, that's going to be January of 1943.
Okay, yeah, so that again matches up with... So launch, then you've got to fit out, which will take another 5 to 6 months, if not more. So you're looking at...
5 to 6 months? Is she a destroyer?
Well,
5 to 6 months is not fit out time.
Well, bear in mind, I'm looking at
So Musashi fit out in 21 months.
Okay, fair enough.
But how much of that time was them having that done to them in secret, essentially? Because they had to keep it all tightly under wraps.
I mean, that's just not. It's really not much longer than what you would expect for a fitting out time for a battleship of that size. I mean,
yeah. To be fair, I'm looking.
Like Bismarck is 18 months. Tirpitz is 22 months.
I'm going off the other Yamato completion times here. So from laying down to completion, it's about 4 years, give or take. So given 4th of the 5th, 1940, you are looking at middle of 1944. So just in time for...
And not at all worked up. The sailors don't even know how to light the fires. Like, they haven't done her trials.
I'm just going like literally. If you just go like same amount of time as Musashi, she completes October 1940, late October 1944, and then give her like 4 months of workup, which is about as much time for her to be declared operational. And that's going to put you in February of 45.
October
built in time to be bombed in harbour.
October 44. Are you 100% sure on that? I think you're... I think
that's unreasonable.
32 months from May of 1940 is January 1943. 21 months for fitting out, the same time as Musashi. That puts you in October of 44.
Which means that she's not going to be overall that useful.
Yeah, the only real difference here is Tengo. And at that point, the only real difference is you're basically ending up with one of 3 scenarios. The USN gets both ships before they get to... So the the US Naval Air Service gets both ships before they get to contact. They get one ship before they get to contact, and the other one is mostly undamaged when it gets to contact. Or you have both ships battered, but coming into contact with the standards. At which point the standards put them down. It depends entirely on how much effect having more having another Yamato there, helps. That's the whole thing here.
Yeah, because it's like I don't like the standard chances versus 2 Yamatos, even in good working condition.
I mean, the airstrike is going to put them. They're just going to keep pummeling them with air power.
Yeah.
Like
The battleships are really this is to stop line in case the air power fails, but that's we've seen how that plays out historically, right?
And even if they get through that air power, the condition they're going to be in afterwards.
Yeah, well, think
The
of how many
standard's
torpedoes
gonna
and
put 'em
bombs you
down.
take.
Real quick, Pit 426. The short answer is the waters were viewed by the IJN as way too confined, and in reality, they were right. The U.S. was practically suicidally desperate to put North Carolina, or to put Washington and South Dakota in there, and it very nearly went horribly wrong.
I would also raise the point that it was just against Japanese doctrine. The only reason they used the Congo class that early was because they were viewed as being a expendable unit like the rest of the cruiser and destroyer force, not part of the main battle line. Whereas the battleships were explicitly to preserve until the decisive battle after the American fleet was worn down. So they weren't really seriously considering employing them in the first place, compared to, say, the Congo class. Remember, even though the Congos are redesignated as fast battleships in the same classification as the rest of the Japanese battleships, the Japanese still view them the same way as they did before the reclassification, because that was just an administrative thing and nothing more.
I mean, gunnery officer Halsey didn't have any other choice.
Absence of cruisers.
Unless
The
and
Japanese
he
were
didn't
throwing
even have
battle
enough
cruisers in.
destroyers to send in a purely destroyer force, which honestly, as was proved later on in that campaign, to be the ideal night fighting force in and amongst those islands.
If utilized properly, yeah,
yeah,
which the Americans weren't really doing early on,
No,
unfortunately.
it took a while, but
Sail in the straight line in front of the enemy destroyers, and don't worry about torpedoes. Yes, use your guns. Yeah.
yeah, the whole time the destroyer guys, at least this is what I've heard from in various conversations, that what's the guy, the Midway historian guy whose name I can't remember right now, Shattered Sword author.
John Paschal?
Yeah, that Partial is had, like, on podcasts and stuff. I mean, he was going through various communiques and stuff like that, and the destroyer captains and Desron commanders were livid. They weren't being allowed to utilize their destroyers the way they wanted to, which was very much the don't use your guns till you expect your torpedoes to have opened up. And the gamble both did and did not work, gunnery officer. Both sides had to abandon the field that night, and South Dakota was out of the theater at that point. She was not capable of coming back into service without some serious work. And he lost a good percentage of his destroyers. It technically barely worked on a very, very narrow definition. That battle was overall a draw, strategically and even tactically, with the sole exception of Henderson did not get bombarded. Lee did well to make sure he did not lose 2 battleships that night. He did exceedingly well. And he deserves every ounce of credit for that battle because of it. Yeah, and they were mad about it. They were exceedingly mad they weren't allowed to have independence of action. But they weren't. So they have search radar. They do not have radar fire control at this point. The U.S. broadly. And so they're doing, that the shooting that Washington did, that was over optical fire control, which really points to just how good Lee had gotten that ship worked up, and not just Lee, because it wasn't all Lee. There was a huge amount of work done by the ship's head fire control officer, the gunnery officer, the radar officers. It wasn't Lee's idea to have a direct communication line run from the radar people to the fire control people. That was a crew member's idea.
Also note that radar was not a panacea either in this period. Like, it helps, but you can still be blindsided by things with radar simply because there were technical difficulties. People did not understand how to use it immediately. There were also issues where things could blur together or confuse operators. Because a lot of these early radars are pretty low resolution sets, right? So it's very hard to tell two objects apart when they're relatively near to each other. Which is a huge problem for gunnery, especially when it comes to, say, fire control. Well, for example, a lot of the reason the Americans in South Pacific actions after they get fire control overestimate their kills against Japanese ships very heavily is because they'll see the shell splashes show up on the radar, on the PPI, right? And well, not even PPI, other displays, right? Multiple scopes being used. And they'll see the splashes, and the radar blip will expand, and then it'll disappear. Splash goes away, and the radar's lost it. And they think, oh, well, the Japanese ship is sunk because there's no more blip there anymore. And the Japanese ship, in reality, is turned away to avoid fire. But because the blip from the splashes that missed and the ship were blurred together, when it disappears, Japanese ship is off the scope. The Americans would just assume they had sunk it, which was not the case. But
the U.S. was not running around with fire control radars in this period, Pitt. They have search radars, and to be honest, they're kind of behind where the RN is on what's actually out on a bunch of ships. The other thing, gunnery officer, yes, and she had to stop over for a lot of work to get a lot of repairs done on her way to the Atlantic.
Okay.
She had a turret that was effectively inoperable. For one. Two, she had shell holes through a good chunk of her living spaces. All of those need to get patched up. Her wiring shot. They need to do serious work to her wiring to fix the identified problems. She's got shell holes through her upper works causing problems. Like, she goes back to a yard, gets fixed up, and goes to the Atlantic.
Right. So the next question is simply entitled, and I quote, "Thoughts." And you'll see why. I'm just going to put it in theatre at sea. My first thought is, it's literally just Japanese Deutschland. That's all there is to say, and that's all I have to say. That's the only thought.
Yeah,
I
why
have.
would they ever build that?
Yeah. Again, my thoughts.
no,
exactly.
but it's even worse, Deutschland, because it's only got, what is this,
Four
four?
guns.
Are those
Yeah.
4 guns? Ouch. That's worse.
Yep.
Good luck doing effective salvo sizes, but
You can't do effective. Yeah, gunnery officer, I'm aware.
Yeah. That just...
We've
That helps
moved on.
prove my point.
Yeah, we've moved on.
Yeah.
We've moved on.
Yeah, for that Japanese ship design, it just makes you think... Sweden called, they want the coastal defense battleships back.
Not even
I
that.
don't
think any of the Swedish coastal defense battleships were capable of quite the same speed or range. Maybe if they were
I would also
Swedish
point out
battleships
that
to escort to do coastal defense off the coast of Brazil, perhaps.
yeah,
but
I would
Yeah,
also
but
point
that is
out.
that's what the
12,000
design
nautical miles
reminds
at
me of.
20 knots.
Yeah, I would also point out that I have this is a ship that's looks first. The specifications are tacked on to suit whatever thing it's in, with no real cause given to how the ship would actually achieve those specifications. I highly doubt that it can achieve those speeds, and I highly doubt it can achieve that range.
Why not? I mean, 24 knots isn't that fast
29 knots
on
is.
that whole thing. 29 knots? So I
29
said that's
knots on
24.
7. No, that's 29.
That-
It's clearly close at the top.
Okay, yeah, 29 knots. Yeah,
No,
the 24. I thought it was 24 knots is where the Swedish battle
No.
the friendship came in, but
no,
29? No.
exactly. Moving
On less
swiftly.
than 70,000 shaft horsepower.
Yeah. No.
I mean, how much did the town need for their speed?
Yeah, it's best. It's
Well, towns are not
it's
quite
it's,
as large as this.
it's best for us not to linger, shall we?
Yeah, let's move on.
What if the Philippines and Palau group of islands were bypassed in favor of solely taking Iwo Jima and Okinawa?
You're not successfully bypassing the Philippines. Trust me, the U.S. Navy tried.
I would also point
The
out.
politics didn't allow for it,
I would also point out that
and it wasn't for Okinawa. It was to go hit Formosa to do the same job of cut the Japanese off from their southern conquests and resources. So like those are your two options for it, just because of the geography. And you also have to wear down Formosa anyways for Okinawa. But the politics just in general required retaking the Philippines. It's not just MacArthur, it's regaining a territory that we are supposedly working on establishing as its own independent country. And there's also the fact that it was ours, you took it from us, we're taking it back. Like there's a lot of political feelings there on that one.
So, next question. Okay, the Great War ends in 1918 with the Central Powers' victory. The Kaiserliche und Königliche Marine resumes construction on the Ersatzmonarchs in 1919. Could they finish them before 1924 when the dysfunctional nation finally collapses? I'm sorry to break this to you, Chief, but in the event of a Great Powers' victory in 1918, the Austro-Hungarian Empire is still collapsing in 1918. The only thing that happens is that Austria, as the Austrian Empire, retains control probably of the coastline of Slovenia and northern Croatia, maybe Bohemia if they're lucky, and has all of that, like I said, Foxo, if they're lucky, by force. You'll have the entire Hungarian crown breaking off into its own separate polity, which will then start fighting everyone around them to try and hold on to their own empire as it collapses.
The historical Hungary.
Although this time there won't be anyone to stop them doing horrific things to their minorities. You'll have even if Serbia somehow doesn't exist, which if Serbia exists in any form, they will just go northwards and seize whatever territory they can lay their grubby hands on as quickly as they can. And Austria will be powerless to stop them trying to secure what has happened. Once the dust has settled, which will probably take till 1924, the Ersatz monarchs will probably still be sat there, unrestarted in 1924. And now the Kaiserliche und Königliche Marine has a problem. Well, it depends entirely on what's happened. If Austria has been reduced to Austria, basically Greater Austria, which is the parts of the empire that didn't actually want to break away and had a pretty decent deal. So things like Slovenia, the northern
We
part
do have
of
a
Croatia,
decent deal.
they would have had a better deal than the rest of them. And it's
Yeah,
That
but that's
doesn't
like
make it a
saying
decent deal.
that's the thing. Their turd sandwich was slightly better than Hungarians' turd sandwich.
well, the Hungarians were basically their own separate polity for most of the latter part of the empire, paying lip service to Vienna.
Honestly, I just doubt they're going to have Trieste after all is said and done.
I mean,
I mean,
if
hang on, how does the war end again?
Central Power's victory,
Oh, Victor. Huh?
even with a victory, the empire's still fracturing by 1918.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just going to be a case of starts falling apart, and the vultures will circle. The Italians will be hungry for revenge. Who knows? Who knows what Serbia is going to be? What position Serbia is going to be in? There'll be a mad scramble for the remains of the empire among all the states that break away as the ethnic conflicts start up. I mean, it's going to be a bit of a mess.
Like
Yeah,
Croatia's had several
Romania.
major revolts. Honestly,
Honestly, I just don't see Trieste being part of the empire by the time we get to 1924 or so.
Yeah, and also to be
the
fair,
question is it Croatian or is it Italian?
So the Austro-Hungarians did not support the Ottoman fleet during the Gallipoli campaign because the Austro-Hungarian surface fleet could not get out of the Adriatic.
nope.
They would have been simply cut down at the Otranto Strait. Basically, their only extra Adriatic adventures were just submarines, which some of them were Austrian, a lot of them were just German boats with Austrian officers aboard to pretend that they were Austrian boats.
Yeah.
But
Moe, there was actually a fairly sizable portion of the Kaiserliche and Königliche Marine left in 1918. You still had 3 of the Tegetovs, you had all of the pre-dreadnoughts, including the 3 excellent Radetskis. You had, I think it's 6 to 7 cruisers. All of their
Right.
most
One
of
or
their
two
war
might have been
builds-
excellent. I do think calling them excellent by the time of 24 might be pushing it.
Well,
I mean,
they're
4
excellent.
pre-dreadnoughts. But
Well,
I mean, they had a decent amount of their main battle fleet survive simply because they did not use it really that much.
yeah.
you get to remember,
how
by
That's why the
1980
Italians were trying so hard to actually kill them in port because they had
I
no
mean-
other way of actually attacking them because they wouldn't leave fucking port. Pardon my French.
Yeah, Moe. Yeah, you're right. It's not useful in maintaining the country. You just said, was there a functional force left? Yes, was the answer to that question. There is a functional force left.
But that force is in revolt by 1919.
Well, the force itself isn't, but the place where it's based
I'm
is.
pretty sure the force just take over the city and the local area
No.
because they haven't been paid.
No, they're handed over to. They're basically the fleet is sold to.
Not quite Yugoslavia
to
yet,
not
but
quite
yeah, we're
Yugoslavia
going to
left.
become Yugoslavia.
Yeah, basically wholesale.
Yeah.
It's basically at that point that the Tegetovs are, the 2 of the Tegetovs are sunk by the Italians because they don't want the
One of them.
No, 2 of them in harbour.
So in
Only
this
one of them was
question,
sunk in harbor. The other one was sunk on the earlier in 1918 on an operation that was supposed to take them
yes.
against the Otranto Straits.
Oh yeah.
So 2 Tegetovs survived the war itself. One of them goes to Italy. One of them goes to France.
But yeah, they are.
so what you're telling me that in this timeline, there's a good chance we get a Croatian battleship.
No, because Croatia's not going to have the funds to even maintain half of the Kaiserliche and Königliche Marine. Never mind the battle line. Basically, the
And again, you're gonna have
Basically,
the
yeah.
Italians on this like vultures waiting for any weaker state. Whatever happens in the Adriatic, they're going to be there to secure the Adriatic for themselves because they absolutely do not want to tolerate again having any significant naval power in the Adriatic. It's part of why they were so adamant that nothing goes to the Yugoslavs from the post-war settlement from the fleet itself.
This is the thing.
Yeah, but
Short
it just
of,
depends on what condition Italy's in. if
it
the
doesn't.
Yeah, I mean,
It doesn't
depends on how the
matter.
war ends, which
It
is hard to
doesn't-
say. But
mean-
they'll be in more of a state to do whatever they want after the Austrian Empire collapses, because then it's just a no man's land. Who's willing to actually stick their neck out to organize these states? If say the Italians are like, okay, well, we're not going to march and make sure we take Trieste and we take these key islands. Who has the navy to stop us?
Never underestimate the ability of an aggrieved nation to rebuild their military. And the other thing to keep in mind is the Adriatic is ruled by light forces.
Yep. And the Italians have a decent amount of those. But yeah, basically, as I said, it's basically the one thing I say is this: unless you have either a Great War that is over by Christmas 1914 or a Great War that doesn't happen, the ersatz monarchs are doomed to never be completed.
I'd say they're doomed without a World War One as well.
No, without a World War...
Austria-Hungary is a ticking time bomb.
Yes,
and its fuse is very burned out.
Yes, it is.
The moment what's his name is shot, there's no real hope of recovery.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is what I mean.
And even were he to live or not get shot, your hope of holding the empire together is so slim.
I mean, you're not really looking
it's almost non-existent.
You're not looking at holding the empire together. You're looking at whatever Austria emerges after the empire collapses being powerful enough to retain.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's...
They were so reliant on Hungary for their land-based military power.
It was a mixture of Hungary and the Czechs, because the Czechs were the center of their war production.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the Czechs really did not like being part of the empire at this point, even before World War One. Sort of late 19th century, the Austrians almost lose control of Czechia several times.
And of course, there's the whole thing where Hungary's only in the empire because they're basically forcibly reintegrated by Russian troops.
Yeah, and it's a case of Czechia by the 20th century is de facto ruling itself, which is why it's the one country that comes off well from the collapse of the empire.
Because they were already ready to go.
Hungary doesn't come off terribly either, but that shouldn't be too surprising.
Well, it doesn't. It doesn't come off terribly.
Losing 60.
It doesn't come off terribly at first.
A communist revolution, a civil war.
Yeah, like
I said, too terribly, because remember here, we are talking about some damned thing in the Balkans.
Yeah, the thing is, like, Hungary breaks away fully territorially intact, and
then just implodes.
Yeah, and then the thing is, they were going to get off fairly easily until they decided to do something aggressively silly.
Oh no, I don't have that. It's they took the borders of Greater Hungary, which are the Hungary's medieval borders. Not realizing medieval borders don't work in the age of nationalism. Because the Croatians...
why Austria-Hungary fell apart. Fuck that, Habsburgs.
It's a case of...
Can we...
The Croatians were always going to revolt. The Serbs in Berat were always going to revolt. The Slovenes were always going to revolt. It was a matter of when.
Blackburn, Black Maximus, and Knight. Remember, please read the title. It's catch-up ramblings. We're still doing the catch-up. We're not taking new questions.
Catching up.
But yeah, Dragon, could you record those two questions, pretty please?
I haven't been recording questions in general, but okay. Like, I've been busy doing something.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, that's right. You don't have to record questions. It's catch-up. That's the whole point.
And yeah, if this is a catch-up, I thought we don't take...
Oh, yeah, that's right.
See,
this is why my brain is frazzled today.
If it was an extra, I would be, but since it's a catch-up, it's not.
No. Question 9, why did
save those questions for next time.
Yeah. Question 9, why did the USN refit all the Colorado-class battleships with new superstructure resembling the South Dakota classes, since the older or original superstructure could hinder the fire control solution for gunnery during naval battle bombardments, they still used non-radar fire control? Oh, no, we already answered that.
That one, it has answered beneath it, so...
we did that one already. What is the panel's thoughts on the F-15 Strike Eagle in War Thunder? It's another modern jet. We need more stuff for World War II. We don't need more modern stuff. The core of War Thunder has always been the Second World War, and I'm sick of them pandering to the whales and top tier.
Fleet, that's not the case anymore.
That's not been the case for years. Like
their engine is just not designed. Is fundamentally not designed to handle modern stuff.
I personally think the modern stuff, which they don't have access to any of the actual information on, is rather stupid.
It shouldn't have gone beyond Vietnam.
Considering part of the reason why I think it's stupid, also just quickly explain that before, and things might jump down that. I think it's stupid because they balance stuff off the documents they've received. We keep being told this. Oh, we've got documents that US battleships can only fire once every 50 seconds at their fastest. We We've got document. We have the Russian documents, which give us all the Russians these stuff.
Despite the fact
I
that
have
now-
old Soviet documents that declare an Iowa class as an 18-inch belt. Can I submit that?
Yes, you could, and they would tell you, no, go away. Like, it's the common thing that they say, oh, we only accept physical source proof. So people keep giving them, and they keep rejecting or accepting it.
because it hasn't come
The
from
problem is-
it hasn't come from Papa Putin's fanfiction collection.
No, it's
No.
not that. It's just not what they want
Yeah, it's
Well,
because it's their game.
But
I
this
wouldn't
then is-
dismiss Fleet's claims so handily when you look at some of the modern objects.
Some of, okay,
and
some
it's
of them are
like,
pretty silly.
this is just propaganda stats.
But the reason why they don't like this in general is, how are they meant to balance stuff off these documents
They're not supposed to. There's
when
a
they're not
reason
going to
why.
be getting? I know, but just going off what they say. Oh, we balance based on the documents received. Okay, so how are we going to have any? How are you balancing this based off documents? You don't have them. One of the worst examples of this to me is the Challenger 3. This has been, as far as I'm aware, that's basically not even off the full drawing board yet.
It's not even in
And yet
British
that's in the
Army
game.
service.
Well, it's not even started production or
They don't have
pre-production.
production representative.
Like,
Now, technically speaking,
Thanks,
yes, I know it is the Challenger 2 Life Extension Program, not Challenger 3, but even then, it's the Life Extension Program that hasn't started yet.
yeah, I will. Like,
They've got
And
too
it's
much.
also, but
Look.
it's also a case of them refusing unclassified documents that show them the Challenger 2 doesn't have its correct armor coverage.
yes,
The hull has composite plating on it.
yeah. Because thing is,
It's not just
yeah,
bare steel.
yeah. But thing is, Foxo, if the Challenger had its correct armor coverage, the Russian whales wouldn't be able to penetrate it with their T-90s that they got from the
Well,
Ukrainian.
if you
war
want a better
money.
example, Fleet, the current problem of the Yak-9. The Yak-9 gets an armor-piercing high explosive round, which will one-shot any tank at its BR. They have been categorically proven to not exist.
I know, but again, like I said,
And then they
They
go,
have
oh,
to-
well, we don't believe this document's accurate.
yes. Well, thing is, Dragon, you're
So,
forgetting it's
thoughts on the
Gaijin.
F-15 Strike Eagle? It's too
All
high
right,
BR for me
let's-
to care, and
let's-
they just can't balance them.
Yeah, and
I mean,
also
let's-
it's a
let's
clone
move
of an
on.
F-15
It's a
that's been in the
fucking
game several
let's move
times.
on.
You guys are just getting to grievances now, please.
Yeah, it's a clone of a clone of a clone because it's already in the game.
If
for a
the
long time.
HMS Queen Elizabeth became a ship girl in 1920 with all of her god powers, how does that affect the Anglican Church?
We've answered this basically.
No, we haven't.
Yeah,
We've had a
Nope.
question that was asking effectively the same thing, but it was writ
Uh,
large.
Not really. The previous question wasn't even actually. It was if a ship girl came about. The previous question was about if Mikasa came about. How would it affect the? Technically speaking, this is quite a bit different, but fair enough.
I mean, and it's also asking how would it affect the Anglican Church, and that's a question of
Anglican
theology.
Church, and also if she has her actual full powers of the Queen Elizabeth meta.
Again, I'm still
But-
saying it affects the Anglican Church. It's religion. Religion is not discussed on Ramblings. End of story.
Mm.
but
Yesterday,
it'd be really funny.
no.
It's actually quite an interesting
I'm
question. to think
putting
how it
my
works, but-
foot down for once.
Uh-huh.
No. Do you really want to see me get into this, or are we going to move on?
Honestly, I'd be curious to see you go into it again because you normally get slapped down by someone else. But
Why do you think
Dragon?
I'm not? Yesterday,
I mean, I can just put my foot down now and go, we're moving on.
I already did that, Cyclic.
Yeah.
You don't have to double back me on this one. Yesterday, when
That
someone...
was a phraseology question there. So,
word
Uh,
phrasing, Fleet.
Well, that's a good way to break the tension and move on. Yesterday, when
I don't
someone
think
posed...
Cycling wants to be doing that
when-
TMM, right, my guy?
when someone posed what the British would do if the Scuttled High Seas Fleet reappeared pristine afloat in Scapa, everyone said that they would scrap them. While absolutely so heavy ships with the exception of Deflinger, pristine, and a very iffy Bayern, there are 32 pristine, if outdated, destroyers. Can the RN make use of these as patrol ships? Honestly, that's a good point. Why not?
They don't work.
Hmm.
They don't work with Royal Navy standards.
yeah, so just to interject, having just actually done a whole bunch of reading on German destroyers and other navies post World War One. So one of the problems we really run into with these German destroyers is availability of spare parts. Usually, if you got multiple destroyers, one or two of them was always going to be kept as a cannibalization hulk for spares for the ships. A lot of them just did not hold up in service very well. One of the ones the Italians got had an iron hull because of material shortages in the late war. So she wore down very quickly. And it was just a pain in the neck in general to maintain a lot of the stuff. Some of the experimental machinery and some of the later ones also was, extremely thirsty for cruising operations, which made them only seldom used in fleet exercises. So for wartime service where you're constantly running these ships, they're going to run down very, very quickly. It really might not be ideal for the British when it's great to have the extra hulls, but what do you get out of the hulls versus what you have on your own? You have to crew these hulls, and the British are not exactly they're not dying for manpower, but they're not exactly swimming in it either. This might be something that's better off for, say, being cast off to a Allied Navy as a second-hand ship. They operate for a few years, for a year or two before they get something newer from British yards or Flower class corvettes or whatever. But they're just not going to be very useful for the Royal Navy.
So, looking at them, the ships
No,
that
right.
work are mostly the V-25 and G-101s in terms of destroyers.
Right.
The 101s
Do
are
the
not-
irony. Give them to the French. Give them to the Free French.
Well, no, you wouldn't even give them to you would give them just to France, because at this period it's probably just
Well, the Free French, the
Free
problem
French,
with the Free French is they were already having enough issues with operating their own ships without having
Well-
easy access to spares. So,
Then again, though, is this
Okay.
the point when the Free French are even here?
is it 1939?
It doesn't have a year on it.
Ah.
So
That'll really depend on when it is then.
it literally just
I mean,
says
even before then, though, it's the French are not going to have really the spares either. They're going to be they have a pretty sizable fleet of modern destroyers and such. So I don't really see why they would be bothered with such ships. I mean, they were also, licensed building flowers and such. So, they had their own ideas of what they wanted to get going forward. I don't know if they'd really be wanting to bother with these kind
And
of things,
also-
because also
Well-
the Navy's also competing with the French Army for manpower too. So
honestly, I don't even see any of the British colonies wanting them either, really, because they're just too hard to maintain.
Yeah.
Unless you thoroughly strip them of everything, then put new stuff on them, which that's going to be expensive.
With that expense and effort, you might as well just go for new builds.
Why not?
And especially because, again, for most of the attached Allied navies that the British are supplying, for the most part, what's really useful for them to have, and what they generally did was, okay, you're going to take, corvettes or sloops for anti-submarine patrols in the Atlantic, or around your local territory. That was really the ever-present threat, was Axis submarines. Where you need to worry about Axis surface ships for fighting, where you have the Royal Navy proper with its own fleets that the British had plenty of to handle. I mean, you did see them obviously employ modern Allied destroyers and such where they were available, like, in the case of the Poles, or for example. But for the most part, it was second line duties because that was just the easiest way to integrate them into Allied forces.
I mean,
So honestly,
the only way-
strap 'em.
the only
Dragon,
place I can see
please.
him being useful
Um,
is if it's into the war and just attaching stuff like the scrap iron flotillas. We've already got old, obsolete, run-down destroyers.
Scrap iron? No, that's not comparable at
so
all
I'm always
because
saying-
those ships were still newer.
Yeah, but it's just a case of they're just hulls.
Arguably, some of the scrap
You
iron
need
flotilla
mass.
that were actually in a worse state than these might be. But,
Yeah.
but I'm going off the
commonality of
Clemsons
parts.
they got. The Clemsons at least had working engines
and
sometimes,
also the US is
and
right there
spare parts.
providing parts.
I think
Whereas
it's
these German ones don't have spare parts. Even if,
Yeah.
technically speaking, most of their boilers are based off Parsons.
yes. I was reading about the raid on Saint Nazaire, and a comment about Campbelltown, which is received from the Americans, is that she's seen as barely seaworthy and of little use to the Royal Navy in 1941.
A lot of them were. I believe the report actually says only 40% of the ships received in the Destroyers for Bases agreement were actually classed as seaworthy without major overhaul, but still required overhaul.
Yeah.
It was honestly an excellent play by America to get rid of some really useless boats for some useful islands.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
It's more
very-
just the idea of
have to give you credit.
1941
I think we
Britain.
can move on to the next
yeah,
question.
yeah, Dragon, please read what I've put below the question.
Which one?
The one.
There's a few of them.
No, the one that I'm at right now. Because I really don't want to. I really don't want to do this. I am.
Don't worry, I can actually answer this
it's
one
another
pretty
ale
easily.
thing,
For the
isn't it?
record, yes, it is. And this one I actually remember was from Night. And it's actually really easy for me to answer, Fleet.
Make it quick.
Well, do you want to read it out then, Fleet?
In Azur Lane's Pledge of the Radiant Court, would it make sense that Renan and Repulse met upon hearing Hood was dying? Remembering the loss of Hood would have pushed them into helping.
They wanted to help, they couldn't.
Yeah.
They were literally locked in that dimension by a multiversal being who goes, I don't want to deal with you for now. Stay in there.
Again.
They got
this-
locked in the timeout box.
Okay.
Genuinely.
Okay, we're done.
They went-
Moving on.
then went to
Moving
help
on.
Queen Elizabeth Meta at the end.
We're done.
oh, you're not. He's not done. There's more.
Yeah, this is why I
I
want
see
to
what the
be
next
done as
question
fast
is, Fleet.
no, it's another ale.
Yes. Oh, sad Fleet noises.
I warned you against doing this, Fleet.
I will point out that there weren't any Azur Lane questions until recently. Dr. Clark!
Yes, that's because of Dr. Clark. You are entirely right in blaming him.
Yes, I am blaming
On
him.
the other hand, his point that you do need to learn about it, even if you don't like it, is also true.
No, it bloody well isn't.
Hey, I learn a lot of things I don't like, and I just because it can still be useful.
Similar to the other uses Mikasa ship girl question, but replaced with a Margi, how does that change things? Battlecruiser versus carrier version. Well, assuming that if it's a Margi, then she's not the same influence as Togo Hayashiro because she's not based on Togo Hayashiro. She's just a random crazy woman claiming to be a battleship and is discounted immediately for being a random.
She's
crazy
not because
woman.
she has rigging,
And it's also...
and she has all these memories of what's happened and knows all of this quite in detail. And also, if it's a Margi, and because they explicitly mentioned the carrier version, depending on when she appears, that's going to be very interesting because that is based on because this is based on the Unryu class Amagi.
Ay, Shiva.
So if she does come back, especially earlier, that's going to be quite interesting to see how that might impact Japanese carrier development.
Oh, bugger.
I was
How
talking
much
just because
lesson
like, as a ship.
you could draw from the rigging, because none of it is
Well, no,
to
it's
scale
it's
with the ship.
it's not the rigging, it's their knowledge of history and stuff.
How
That's
much
the interesting bit.
Technical knowledge is,
A lot.
Let's.
They actually have a lot.
I mean, they're a dragon.
If you talk to your average service member, some of them have no idea what the hell they're handling.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
But the whole
Yeah.
point is since they're the actual
It'd be
ship,
really
they
funny
do
if
point
he
out
comes
they
back
do
and all
genuinely
knows
know how it all works.
I scrape things, I paint them, I scrape other parts of the hull, I paint that, and that's all I know, boss.
Like, there's a couple of points brought up where various characters go, yeah, no, I could build, if you just gave me the parts, I could build you this boiler from scratch. Because it was once me. I know how my stuff works.
Dragon,
But
you're
see,
missing the
you know
best
how
part.
to make a lung out of bits of you, like.
No, that's not really.
Dragon, you're missing the best part though.
Mm.
Can we get to the point?
Maki's just a straight up kitsune.
Yes.
And so what?
Which actually,
get to the point, damn
no,
it!
that's actually that's a lot more significant than I thought.
Why?
Yeah,
wait,
'cause-
how familiar, Fleet, are you with Japanese mythology?
Do I look
Aren't they supposed to be
familiar to
tricksters?
you?
They're tricksters, but they're also deities and actual gods.
Oh god, no.
So you have genuinely just had an actual god descend in front of you. That's one. That's going to have a.
cause any religious conflicts.
Well, considering they've pledged their loyalty to
Wait,
the
hang on
emperor.
a second. Hang on a second. We're now on a religious question, so we have to skip it. Damn.
It's it's actually quite fascinating what could end up occurring.
Can we please keep it limited and not spin out into
Well,
a
that's
massive
why-
timeline?
But that's why we stopped there.
Good. Right. Move on.
Also, we don't have Clark to bully you with it yet.
Yes, and thank God for that.
Oh, just wait till Monday.
But Dragon, at least it's not with the crazy kitsunes in AL.
We're
It's the same
done.
one.
The next question is also an interesting one, actually.
Thoughts on the ships from the Castle Federation series. Now, Castle Federation is a series of science fiction books created by Glyn Stewart. And I have not read a single one of them.
I have. Glyn Stewart, very good writer. I have read
This is the guy. Yeah, no, I know who this is. Okay.
Yeah, I have read the brief of Space Carrier Avalon, and it's pretty cool. I need to buy more of them. Overall, and what I've actually seen of the art, I like their art. From a purely aesthetic perspective, I like their art. They make sense reasonably. So beyond that, I can't really say much more, but they're definitely not bad.
From what I understand, Glyn Stewart also works with Dr. Clark and Drac. I think he's been on Ramblings at one point.
I think he is actually, yes.
Because...
Yeah, several times.
Yeah, because he likes to have he tries to put modern naval terminology and modern naval thinking into his books as best he can. And make the ships try and make as much sense as you can make with, FTL capital ships.
Well, and I also like that without going into hard science fiction necessarily. That's an interesting line describing Cyclic, I believe. Sorry, I've just read from a different chat. Just reading on someone was asking what's a cyclic on Clark's server about cyclic requested texting, and Runon. A cyclic is a tiny little doohickey that which likes to set up things like naval history servers.
Tiny.
What's this in general on that channel?
It's in the cyclic requested texting channel.
Okay.
Oh, that's very funny.
I'm going to unironically answer this with,
Sorry, it's just I saw that comment from Runon, and
Why?
from what I'm aware of, it does kind of sum you up pretty well. I don't know about the tiny little doohickey part, but
No.
Tiny little.
I don't set up
think
naval
that-
history servers. Like I just don't.
He's just here.
He abides.
He-
He fears no man, but that thing.
Azole. It scares me.
next question, Fleet, do you want?
Yes, we don't really have experience on the ship, sadly. If a fly-by-wire missile is developed in the 1920s, what would the doctrine regarding them be? Overwhelming first salvo, finish after a gun duel, or would the launch from magazines determine the doctrine? The missile itself is going to determine the doctrine. Like, if it's developed in the 20s, this thing is going to be absolutely gigantic. And probably
It's
driven...
just flatly not possible to develop in the 20s.
Well, yes, that's also very true. But, yeah, you just can't.
Probably not, but...
You can have a
I
wide...
can see a few
have...
British people in a shed giving it a go.
They're going to
Yeah.
fail.
Well, no. Red.
You need the jet engine, like a proper functional
not
jet engine.
You
You could try
necessarily.
to do this with a propeller aircraft. Yes.
I was more
However-
thinking rocketry.
I'm thinking more like a rocket. It's kind of like a fly-by-wire rocket-propelled glide bomb sort of thing.
So
Rocketry
you
isn't
sort of
there
just
yet.
fire it up and then it glides.
Rocketry
here's
isn't
why
there
I'm
yet.
here's why I'm sketchy on that. The weight.
Yeah.
You
That's
have
good.
mechanical computers. That's all you have.
But you wouldn't necessarily need much computing.
The thing is, chat.
You'd need a lot.
Yeah, chat. Bear in mind what much computing means in this period. Now apply the resulting realization to the size of the missile and where rocketry is in the 1920s.
I mean, it probably wouldn't work very well, but
It wouldn't work. Period.
No, but if you think about it, technically you've already got you've got wire-guided torpedoes.
No, you don't. Not in this period.
You sort of
do.
Yeah,
you
fleet.
do.
Well, no,
Fleet.
There's
not.
that stool-powered one.
I
that
want
sort
to
of
make
turns.
let me make myself clear. Not in the sense of the modern wire-guided torpedo.
Yeah,
There
but
are
that's not what
That's
was
not
being
necessarily
talked about.
what we have to talk about here.
You have shore-based installations with wire guidance for their weapons.
I don't quite see why why you couldn't mount one on a. It would be hideously impractical, but you could probably put it shipside.
You could, but the problem,
It's not going to work. That's the problem.
I'm
And
just
it-
here thinking. I'm just here trying to make something that might
Come out of-
conceivably at least fly towards a target.
Come out
Yeah,
of the
and see,
shed.
that's the problem. You can't do it with any sort of the consistency or reliability, or for that matter,
But
safety
this
of
is the
storage upon a
20s,
warship.
so
Hang on, that is required for naval use as a weapon. It's going to be so utterly impractical and useless as a weapon, and so just utterly pointless that it's never going to get fielded. So you cannot make a viable weapon. So I it's a huge stretch by 1945 to be able to do it, and there was precisely one nation that pulled this off,
Was it
and
the
that
US?
wasn't Germany.
Was it the US by any chance?
Yes.
Wow, what a shock!
And that was a air-launched glide weapon. Although I think they did have a rocket-propelled one as well. I can't remember. But the one I'm remembering off the top of my head right now is BAT, and that was actually active radar homing. There were some IR-guided bombs and stuff like that, but yeah, Germany had a bunch of like manual command line of sight stuff.
Just-
Or not manual command, but radio command line of sight.
to a certain extent, can't you just send the signals down a wire rather than over a radio?
I mean,
So the Germans got, they pilfered from the French and the Italians.
I mean, I
Most of
suppose
them at
you
this point-
don't have necessarily have the copper for it, but just to make enough spool. But
I mean, you're not
the
still not
Germans-
doing that in the 20s.
You're,
Like
fu-
you
you're
don't
running.
have the material science, you don't have the computing science, you don't have the engineering available yet. You don't even have the aerodynamics theory available yet for this. To successfully understand how to control it.
I mean,
Okay, so Gargoyle
this
was
is the-
the rocket one that I was thinking
wait,
of.
so this is the 20s.
Yes.
You can't
Yeah.
use rocketry then, because the liquid-fueled rocket doesn't exist.
probably.
I'm
not
sorry,
there.
but you're not using a powdered rocket for this.
Yeah, this is the thing. You're basically talking. You're basically running into the brick wall that is science just isn't there. You just can't. It's one of those things where you go, no, this doesn't work. It just
I'm
doesn't.
just coming up with some very stupid ideas.
Bro, look, I am all.
Steam catapult launched. No, you use a cordite catapult and
No,
just
look,
poof.
I
Wang it.
am, look, I am all for, I am all,
Oh my God.
look, I am all for
That
the,
screams safety.
yeah, I am, look, chair, I am loving
That actually
the,
makes Long Lance storage look safe.
yeah, chair, I am,
No, but like Ark Royal before she became Pegasus had a cordite
So
seaplane carrier.
I want to
Seaplane
direct
boat.
the panel to what Seed Otters just put in Theater at Sea chat. That's 1926 from one of the best rocket scientists on the planet.
yes.
That's no fighter aircraft stands a chance when that thing's around.
My God, the power, the speed, the speed. But no, in all seriousness, chair, I am loving the British engineer in a wooden garden shed vibes you are outputting, but unfortunately,
Why
it's
don't
just
you
not
start that way,
possible. It's just not possible.
Give enough boffins in a shed long enough, they'll do it.
Yes, long enough. It'll take them till, I don't know, about 1945.
I don't know. It depends how much tea we give them and a bit of opium on the side.
It's
It
not gonna
depends.
work.
You have to
None
put
of that,
in
none of that's gonna
competition.
help. These are fundamental, technical,
Hang on.
and
This
scientific
is very,
limitations.
very, very, very stupid. But what if you don't even
Don't.
think about controlling the missile from the you've got the wires mounted on both wingtips, and essentially you fly it like a kite.
Won't work. It'll just spin out.
Yeah.
I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah, no, you'd have to have very fine like
Torque.
clutches on your
Don't even have that today.
Torque. Anyway, moving on.
It's not necessarily going very quickly, is it?
Who should be in charge of a Commonwealth space program in 1958?
The Brits.
Yeah,
The
fundamentally.
ones with rockets.
Basically, that's the fundamental thing. Like, look, it'll be on paper. It's a joint leadership umbrella with all people's
You can
views
have
being
people
represented.
from Canada, Australia, whoever else.
Yeah, like
I guess include the Kiwis so they don't
Yeah.
feel neglected.
yeah, like it will be on
That's what I was
paper.
getting at.
On paper, it will be a joint leadership apparatus. In practice, the British will be first among equals.
And it's launching from northern Scotland. Like,
no,
Why wouldn't you
it'll
launch from
be-
Australia?
Yeah, Woomera. Woomera exists.
well, you've got that as another launch point too, but for a good chunk of what you want to launch on, you're going to be launching
That's-
from northern Scotland. It's really ideal for a lot of things.
Like Black Arrow
Time
was
period.
tested in Australia.
Yeah,
The-
I'm not saying you can't, but
Yeah,
Scotland is
yeah.
a really ideal launch point for
Yeah.
a lot of things.
You're basically.
So are you
It's
all
also
sleeping
quite
on
close to
the
the-
Kenyan superpower?
Oh no!
Because I've
Stop.
watched enough African
Stop.
movies, they could do it.
Stop. Look. Cyclic is correct. The reason that you would use Woomera for the early period of the program, when your rockets are fragile, you need clear conditions more than you need anything else, and you basically need reliable weather patterns to launch. You'll probably see a Scottish launch site constructed to launch very mature rockets that can handle conditions that aren't completely clear skies and completely no winds. As and when they appear.
Why would they be Scottish?
Because you can get a lot of orbital paths you want
need
to
the clear.
achieve.
You need the clear drop into ocean for all your staging. You don't want to be dropping these things on Norway.
So why wouldn't you put it like in the Ascension Islands, where you're surrounded by nothing but ocean?
Because you can't,
now anything you want to do on an inclined orbit, or anything you want to do on a polar orbit, which is going to be between the two of them like 90% of what you launch, you're going to be at a disadvantage.
yeah, it's all about orbital. It's all
Now,
about
going
your-
into
yeah.
an equatorial orbit, there might be some argument for that, or a near equatorial orbit, but
I mean, the one advantage.
you're also out in the middle of nowhere, and you got to get this stuff out to them.
Yeah, the thing is with Woomera, and the thing is with Scotland, is that they have two advantages. For one thing, Woomera, again, drop into the ocean off Australia. Scotland, drop into the ocean north of Scotland. You've got... It's quite easy to get stuff to them. For Scotland, it can either go by ship or by land, depending on where the launch site is. Woomera, put it on a train, take it to Woomera, job done. It's... Oh, you wanted a person who would head the program. Oh, I see. Who would head a Commonwealth space program? No idea. I'm not familiar with... Look, go and ask Beady Penguin.
From his back garden shed.
Yeah, go and ask Beady Penguin. He'll know.
Honestly, just go ask one of the head engineers from de Havilland. They've been playing with rockets since the early 30s.
So, next question. Hosh versus Hosho. Oh, come on. That's so obvious.
Hosho.
Yeah, she walks away from that fight laughing hysterically while Hosho burns in the background. And no, that's even without her aircraft. She can outrange all of... Yes, the limited number of guns that Hosho carries as built outrange all of Hosho's armament significantly. And, more importantly, can shoot accurately from that range. They can also penetrate Hosho's armor reliably. And that's not even throwing in Hosho's aircraft.
So with the largest gun she had, the 14 centimeters.
Yeah, 5.5 inch in case, mate. I believe.
No, in single mounts. Single.
Yeah, single mount under the.
Did those have armor-piercing rounds?
I'm literally just going to go and check.
Even
their
if they
characteristics now.
don't, they're quick firing 5.5 inch guns. Hosh will be
I mean,
burned.
yeah, no, it's just going to be probably pretty one-sided. I'm not even sure if they actually can penetrate the armor, but it'll still just raise the upper works, and that's enough.
Yeah.
People still need to breathe.
Yeah.
Yes, they have a common. They do have the Type 2 common and Type 0 common HE.
Well, yeah, even so, it's still just going to be Hosh will be burning. They won't know what the heck's going on, and if she doesn't sink, the Hulk will still be afloat. Oh, what's that? It's Hosho's torpedo aircraft.
I actually need to check Hosha's main guns for a sec.
Dragon, it's not the issue of caliber that's the problem. It's the issue of the capabilities
It's the
of
fact
her
that you
to
say
bring...
that they don't have the range, and I'm curious if they actually would or not.
Dragon,
Well, here's the thing.
Dragon, theoretically-
When Hosh is built, your engagement range is like,
Much
if you're
lower.
lucky, like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 yards.
Yeah, Dragon, there is a one
Like, remember,
innate...
Tsushima is a long-range fight, and that is like 7,000 yards. 5,000 to 7,000 yards is when they opened up with a 12-inch gun, and that was considered a surprisingly long-range fight for
Yeah.
pre-Dreadnought era. And Hosh is older than that.
Yeah, Dragon, the important thing to bear in mind is not the actual capabilities of the guns themselves. It's the ability of the crew of the ship to use those guns. You'd be lucky to land a hit beyond 2,000 yards with Hosh's primary battery.
To be fair, I also think you'll be lucky to necessarily get that good of a gunnery from Hosho in a pedestal mounts.
I mean, you would. We have, like, it's the pedestal mounted 5.5-inch gun. She's a fairly good sea boat. She only has to stay outside of 2,000 yards.
What's her fire control look like?
Non-existent.
For anti-surface?
Even so,
She doesn't have from what I can
So
find.
they're firing
she just
over open
doesn't.
sites. You really can't expect too much better fleet.
I can, because the
In
ballistics
fact,
of the
Navwatch
guns...
doesn't go back early enough for it.
The reason I say I can
Wait,
expect
can I
better
go further
is
back?
that I'm sure someone will have some
See
way
if I can
to
find
pass...
anything on her fire control.
Some way to... She might not have central fire control, but she will at least have some form of range finding for the 5.5-inch guns. Hosh will not have any form of rangefinders. Not in the period she's commissioned. I love the Hosh, but even...
I'm not saying Hosh
Curious.
would
Oh no,
come
yeah,
out.
like, Hosh doesn't stand a chance here. I just do think if
So, like-
Hosho's engaging a surface engagement,
Hosh will, even if her gunners are firing over open sites and having to judge range at the gun mount, she's gonna find the range and nail it in fast. And probably pummel Hosho into retreating.
You mean Hosh into retreating?
Yes.
Well, she
It
can't
doesn't
run...
help that the names are so freaking similar.
Well, she can't... Well, Hosh can't run anyway, even if she wants to.
Well, I mean, Hosho has no
don't
reason
have a
to
diagram.
pursue. She has no way of actually meaningfully putting her down. She can just force Hosh to retreat. Because Hosh is not going to want to remain in this gunfight while her entire upper works are aflame and she's burning from stem to stern on her deck.
Yeah.
And probably slightly under that before you start getting to the armor protection. But, like, she's going to get ripped apart, and I mean, Hosho isn't going to want to stick around to finish her off because she's got no way to finish her off. She's just going to then laugh and leave.
Yeah, the only...
I mean, the reality is she's probably just going to fire so long as it takes her to get out of,
Yeah.
her own 5.5
Did
inch
she
gun range.
survive the war?
So,
I did not realize that.
Yeah, Hosho for some reason survived World War II.
God, I am actually really surprised. I did not realize that at all. Okay, hang
the
on a
only
second. So this
Japanese
might
carrier
actually...
who survived the whole war somehow.
Hang on, because that means she might show up
probably
in the
'cause she was a-
Tech Japan
probably 'cause she was
reports.
a training ship.
Still, a mother should not have to bury her own children.
Too late.
Well, I mean, that's what happens when you decide to declare war on you know who.
Yeah, but at least you should die as well. It's just...
Oh, well, I mean, such is the pain of being a,
Yeah, this
elderly
is
cripple.
this is a bit macabre.
But, hang on a second. Where? Come on. Come through for me, because I'm pretty
What
sure
I will
you're in here
say,
somewhere.
though, she didn't have to bury them. The USN did that at sea for her.
Yeah, but... I
They
didn't
just
mean live
went
from it.
missing.
Nope,
Yeah.
you don't list it. Damn it.
Presumed. dead.
Yeah. So what I'm going to say is, of course, there's also the one and done, which is Hosho's scout from Hosho finds Hosh. A single squadron of torpedo bombers goes out, and honestly, to be blunt, they're probably better off conducting their attacks as single aircraft and just trying to trap Hosh in a spread in multiple torpedoes coming from all angles, so that at least one hits.
I mean, they're going to break off, and they're going to hit her 45 degrees off port and starboard bow. Because it's literally, they're just going to do the textbook attack, and they're just going to put her down violently.
Yeah, she's going to go over and sink in minutes. It's going to be minutes. She's going to go down.
There was no additional context with that question as well at the time, so genuinely, I have no clue what else it was.
Yeah. I mean,
all right, so let's move on, because I think we've beaten this one into the ground.
Yeah. What do the early Hermes designs look like? It's basically the only real things that you get from Hermes in terms of variations is how big is she going to be, and which side is the island going to be on.
No, there is a couple of times where you don't have an island.
There's actually a fair few different Hermes designs early on, because this was going back when Clark was speaking over the head about the idea that no, Britain would just push out one of the early Hermes designs. If the Germans did build the German aircraft carrier I. So, unfortunately, I don't have full access to them, but there are a few more than just that, as I recall.
Right. This is actually the last question. And we've gone for longer than I thought I was going to go for, but it's at least long enough to actually have a decent ramblings.
I'm going to message to the soundboard.
Good.
I would have used the...
Hood complained about the exact same thing on Monday.
So I would have used the sitcom laugh track.
What did I do to deserve this?
Do you want an answer to that?
You started allowing AL questions, is what you did to deserve it?
I didn't start allowing them, they just happened.
And you didn't put your foot down hard enough.
Well, it didn't hit. The problem is cyclic.
I tried to.
Clark's also been pushing them on.
About a year and a half ago, you got bored.
It's
Let me
easier
up
to ask
ramblings.
Fleet.
That's where it all started.
Technically speaking, it is indeed Fleet, but it's also dealing with Knight. And I know Knight can hear me, and Knight will always have hundreds and hundreds of questions.
I do wish
AL ones will inevitably slip in.
I do wish that there'd be less AL questions.
So that's a free way to cut them out.
Like we've had a lot of Azure questions. Can we have none for the next ramblings, please? Well, actually, we can't have any anyway.
Well,
Because
yes, of course, Fleet. We can have none for the next rambling.
Well, no. The next ramblings is going to be 2 weeks from. Is going to be two Mondays on, because what's coming on Monday is not ramblings.
It is technically. It's just a special rambling.
No,
yes.
It's the Drake Strom Dreadnought.
Also, I've been seeing the list of people who's turning up and getting more and more concerned.
Yeah, it's the Drake Strom Dreadnought dissection. It's not a. It's not a ramblings.
I really do need to start and finish that second book.
Yes, you do.
And I need to finish your audiobook recording of the first one for you. So.
Oh, are you
I
recording?
need to know about my Hitlerian wars.
Yes.
Anyway.
Which, yes, that is actually the title they're given for anyone wondering.
Fleet is.
It's just the Hitler version of the Napoleonic Wars.
Except this time there's
basically.
only two. But anyway, so thank you everyone for coming.
Also includes the others, but
yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Please do stick around. The stream will be ending, and a new stream will be starting where I'll be doing this Wednesday's Empire at War, because I refuse to leave my schedule without everything in it.
I'm stealing that meme gunnery officer.
That is a good one. That is a very good one.
I don't need no ammunition.
Just stand still. Glory.
Made with pneumatic. Sorry, couldn't resist.
Hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Anyway, thank you.
Remember, pistol whipping is faster than reloading.
Remember, using your landing gear is faster than going back to the carrier. Right, thank you everyone for coming. Obviously, tune in on Friday for extra ramblings, which is probably going to be a surrogate for the ramblings that we don't have on Monday. Because obviously there's Drake Strom Dreadnought dissection.
This Friday or next Friday?
This Friday.
Okay.
That we don't have on Monday. So just stay tuned for that.
Yeah, the one. So you should also probably mention what time is that one, because I don't think you've mentioned the
Sorry,
actual time
yes.
just yet.
The Drakestrom Dreadnought dissection, owing to the large area to be discussed and a desire to get as much in as possible, will be starting
Just
at
getting huge.
3 p.m. on Monday, the 2nd of December.
1500 hours.
1500 GMT.
1500 GMT. Obviously, you can convert that to your own time zone at your leisure. But then you'll know when the stream goes up.
But know that your time is wrong and ours is right. We are
Yeah,
best.
well, it
we have
literally
proper
was
time.
it was literally the agreed time. So
It
yes,
is the agreed time. It is the time.
The world
You lot
to-
just have to adjust it for regional.
and the French,
Yes, but see,
and the
Dodders-
French get very annoyed at it
Yes, see, Dodders,
Yeah.
there's a reason why it is being streamed.
and streamed and recorded technically. So.
Yes. Because that means that anyone who misses the start can catch it on the back end.
later.
or misses the whole thing if this occurs.
Yes. And of course, we will have a certain guest coming in later on, as they obviously filter in from work and other things. But that's all right, because we're going to be doing a general overview first and foremost of what Drakestrom is before we
Honestly, Fleet, we should probably make a script
Before we-
at some point.
script me nah we
Nah, wing it. What the
nah,
hell could possibly
no,
go wrong?
to quote
Right.
to,
Phoenix, with
to
some of
quote-
the names I'm seeing, a lot.
to quote
a lot
me,
can go wrong.
To quote me, fuck it, we'll do it live.
When Fleet says "fuck it, we ball," you fucking and get the hell out of Dodge.
It's not
Hey,
that
Dada.
bad. Like seriously, it's not so bad. I mean, how
Yes,
often?
but Fleet,
how often do?
It doesn't normally go wrong. You're right. But how often do you have some of the biggest names in naval history turn up?
Well, they may not be turning up at the rate things are going.
At least 2 of them have so far said they are.
Yes, 2 of them are
Have you been
definite.
reading that? Have
Yes.
you read that chat, Fleet?
And Fleet,
Dragon,
you're not
you do,
embarrassing me in front of her.
Dragon, you do realise that I've known about this long before you
Yes.
have.
Which is why I'm saying this is probably a good idea to have some sort of script.
We'll
Already
be-
some notes that you can go back to.
We will be fine. You worry too much.
So do you remember what happens at the Battle of Jutland and Drakestrom?
If all goes well, I'll be outfitting my brand new work truck instead of here.
Sorry, Cyclic.
And why did
Clark's already said he's going to try and get you in for it.
He
Well,
can't.
too bad.
He's working.
Too bad. Unless they want to pay me more than the government does.
No, in short, no. In
Honestly,
long,
knowing
no.
Clark, I could imagine him giving it a go, but
Apparently, Clark has his way, so
Yeah,
He,
but,
I don't-
he already knows I'm not going.
yeah,
So.
yes.
yeah, it's mostly I think just him joking at that point.
Yeah.
but
Right. Anyway, so
Bye for now,
yes,
then.
the thing is,
Shoot, go into your Empire War.
thing is, Dragon, you're the person who has all the knowledge. I'm just the guy curating the whole thing.
Speaking Fleet, you say I have all the knowledge. Well, I've only gone to the series because a mad Swede was saying, "Hey, this is an interesting thing," and I've only read the first book
Yes, which is all we
and
need.
read through the appendices, which I keep
Which
commenting.
is
you
all
with.
we need.
no,
Anyways.
Dragon, get the timeline correct. It was only because a Mad Swede recommended it to me, who then your girlfriend decided she wanted an audiobook version because she's working and can't.
No, but technically speaking, I bought it before you asked for the audiobook version.
Ladies, gentlemen, thank you everyone for coming. Tune in afterwards for Empire at War. I'm going to take a 10-minute break before I start. Thank you, though, everyone, for coming to the Catch Up Ramblings. Tune in on Friday for the full-sized extra ramblings, all that good stuff. Thanks, thanks, Felix and Cyclic, for coming. As always, fantastic work. Couldn't do it without you for some of the questions. Take care, and I'll catch you all next time. Bye-bye!
Remember, I have a day next.
Good lord, that girl.